I was drinking coffee on a Tuesday morning when my neighbor called and said, "Marcus, somebody's building on your lot," and I drove over and found bulldozers, 15, poured foundations, and a giant sign that read, "Riverside Commons, coming fall 2026. And I just stood there, mouthful of coffee, thinking somebody is either really ambitious or really criminal. That's the hook right there, because what happened next sounds like fiction, but it's painfully, gloriously true. I owned those 8 acres since 2009, bought the scrubland for 80 grand. When everyone told me I'd wasted my money, I paid the taxes every year. I checked on it sometimes, but life happens. I was running other properties, traveling, doing the investor thing, and then one morning my buddy Joe calls and says, "You better get down here," so I did, and the place looked like a movie set. Cruise trailers, the smell of fresh concrete, the clank of rebar, the steady thump of a compactor. The site had 5x3 rows of foundations sitting like teeth in a jaw, framing lumber, stacked insulation on pallets, and a smiling foreman says, "It's Riverside Commons, Westfield Development Group, community development for the HOA, interesting." Except I had a deed dated 2009 with my name on it, and 15 years of paid tax receipts to prove it. So how did Riverside Commons get a permit? How did Karen Westfield convince the county that the land was abandoned and belonged to the HOA? Short answer, she filed an adverse possession claim. The county granted provisional title after the 90-day notice, and by the time I learned about it, they were 3 months into a $4.2 million build. You can imagine the next minute I'm flipping through county records, seeing the permit number, the loan documents, the listing of the HOA as owner, and feeling a karate chop of cold in my chest. Then I called my old law partner, Dan Smart. Fast loves courtroom drama, and he tells me to file an injunction. Stop. Everything sees the site. Call the cops if you have to. Normal human reaction, right? But here's the twist that flips the script. I didn't do that. I told Dan no, and I watched. Why? Because there are 2 ways to play that hand. You stop them. Now you get a half-finished mess and a multi-year lawsuit, or you let them finish and you inherit a finished asset that they built on your land. Half-finished buildings are worthless. Complete leased buildings are worth millions. Every dollar Karen poured into steel and glass after that phone call was a dollar of equity being dropped into my backyard mine by someone else. It sounds cold. It is cold. It's also a legal reality. If you build on somebody else's land without permission, improvements become the property of the landowner. So I drove by every week. I parked across the street. I took pictures. I logged dates. I watched roof trusses go up, windows installed, HVAC hooked up, drywall finished, and I didn't say a word. Karen Westfield was good at her job. Charismatic, polished. She dressed up the plaza so well the mayor wanted to cut a ribbon. She gave presentations about community benefit, how lease revenue would cut HOA fees by 40%, how this was a homegrown solution for a growing corridor. She showed slides. She had a leasing packet. She had 14 tenants under contract. Coffee shop, dental office, law firm, yoga studio. It all looked legitimate, and the community ate it up because a promise of reduced HOA dues is catnip. Then came the preview night, a tent hors d'oeuvres that were actually decent. The murmur of neighbors clinking cups, the smell of sawdust and varnish still warm in the air. Karen beamed. Donald Westfield. Her husband talked margins with contractors. I blended into the crowd in jeans and a polo, took notes like a bored journalist, felt the little nudge in my chest that said this is working way too well for people who aren't even on the title. I could have called the county right then, ruined the party, dragged everyone into litigation while the plaza was half full and messy. But again, I didn't. That's the second part of the strategy. Let them complete, let them lease, let the tenants move in, let the bank fund the loan, let the landlord collect deposits, do as much damage as they can, because the more they invest, the more leverage I have when I assert my rights. Disruption to real businesses, moved equipment, employees, deposits. Suddenly the costs of fighting climb, and people prefer a settlement. Except this wasn't about being mean, it was about a legal fact. You can't keep buildings you put on someone else's land simply because you spent money on them. So I filed quiet title trespass fraud. I asked for immediate relief, restraining order to stop rent collection, hand over keys, stop signing new leases, and in a courtroom. The next day the judge flipped through my deed and the tax rolls, 15 years of payments, name after name, no gaps looked at. Karen asked if she'd checked the tax rolls. She hadn't. We relied on deed records, she said, which is true but incomplete. A deed can tell you who once owned the property. Taxes tell you who is looking after it. Now the judge granted the temporary order keys, codes, management to be turned over within 48 hours. The plaza became mine legally as suddenly as a stage set being claimed by a director. Let's be clear, the sense of satisfaction was not glee in someone's ruin. It was a cool professional recognition that laws exist for reasons, and when someone gambles on shortcuts, consequences follow. Karen and Donald scrambled. Their construction loan was secured against a parcel that it turned out they didn't own. The bank, called the HOA, felt betrayed. The community voted Karen out as president when they realized Westfield Development was really a private LLC owned by the Westfields and not an HOA vehicle. The plotline deepened. The HOA sued the Westfields for breach of fiduciary duty and fraud. Mountain West Bank pursued loan recovery. The Westfields spiraled into bankruptcy, foreclosure, the houses, the cars, the firm all gone. During all this, the tenants, real people with businesses and employees, worried. I met with each of them face to face, told them their leases remained valid. I wasn't the kind of owner to evict tenants overnight. I wanted stable cash flow, not headlines. The coffee shop owner cried softly when I told her she could stay. She'd poured her life into that counter and those espresso machines. The law firm's partner asked me bluntly why I'd waited. Patient and cold, he said, half respect, half disgust. I answered honestly, timing matters. I had to decide whether to seize a pile of half-finished concrete or accept completed buildings that generate revenue immediately. Business, not vengeance. Courtroom drama makes good copy, and the judge shredded their defenses. Good faith based on a provisional title doesn't excuse failing a 5-minute tax roll search. Colorado law says improvements made by a trespasser do not become compensable. They become the property of the rightful owner. Weirdly poetic. If you build on a lie, you get nothing but a very expensive lesson. The judge ruled in my favor. Quiet title confirmed, counterclaims tossed, and I made a pragmatic offer. I'd sell the property to Karen for market value, $8 million, generous terms she couldn't muster. The capital the bank foreclosed. I sold the asset to the bank later for $6.5 million. My cost basis, $80,000. Plus taxes and legal fees, my return mind-bending, and the Westfield's bankruptcy relocation reputations burned. Here's the moral, and it sneaks up on you after the climax when you're wiping the dust from your hands. The lesson isn't be ruthless. The lesson is twofold. Respect the rule of law and respect the patience of smart people. Own your paperwork, taxes, deeds, because a lot of abandonment claims fall apart when someone checks the records. And second, patience is not passive. It's a decision, a strategy. And sometimes the most humane choice is the strategic one. I could have stopped them and turned tenants into collateral damage, or I could wait and secure an outcome that preserved businesses and punished the abusers through legal consequence. The result felt like justice, not revenge. The ending has that satisfying click. The Westfields lost everything, the HOA rebuilt. Governance, the tenants kept their businesses, the plaza thrived, and I walked away with a tidy return that let me buy other parcels and sleep at night. But I won't pretend it was a feel-good fairy tale. People got hurt financially, promises to residents evaporated, and the pain of losing one's livelihood is real. I didn't cause that pain for sport, their choices did. Now, and here's the part I want you to chew on. Is this the kind of justice you cheer for, or does it feel like opportunism dressed up as law? At what point does strategic patience slide into moral grayness? If you find someone trespassing on your property, should you always wait for maximum leverage, even if it means more disruption for innocent tenants? Or is immediate injunction the more ethical answer? I want to hear what you think. Tell me in the comments, did I do the right thing by waiting? Or should I have shut them down at the first sign of a scrape of concrete? Have you ever had someone invade your rights and you hesitated? What did you do? Share your stories. Tell me where you stand on justice versus strategy. And if you like this one, hit like, share it with someone who loves a courtroom twist, and subscribe for more real stories that feel like they came out of stranger than fiction headlines. I'll read every comment, I promise, because the best parts of these stories are the parts that make us argue, learn, and maybe, just maybe, think twice before we trust a smiling developer with our community's future.
Cảm ơn các bạn đã xem video.